wakes and then the morning sends the sun high in the sky. Who would hide from heaven's glory? Who would pass the challenge by? La 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 la.
Before we introduce Jyotish and Devi, I would like to share with you a little known Indian sacred text. Those of you who studied Patanjali, the yamas and niyamas, there's actually a new text that was found, the 11th yama. It's called the cell phone yama. So I invite you to practice it with me right now. You take out your cell phone. The little death is silence, but if you want to go into the great silence, turn off your cell phone. And what will happen is when you turn your cell phone off, you'll begin to quake. This is not Kundalini awakening. This is email withdrawal. So it's okay. But honestly, if you could turn your phones off so we can all focus together. Dharma Devi and I, our hearts are full to introduce to you our dear friends, Nayaswamis, Jyotish, and Devi. And when they've been introduced in the past, there have been some interesting appellations they have received at Ananda. Sometimes ministers are called light bearers, and someone called them the headlight bearers, which we affectionately like here in Los Angeles with all of our traffic. But in order to introduce Jyotish and Devi, I'd like to introduce you briefly to the story of Ananda. When you open up Autobiography of a Yogi, the very first sentence speaks of discipleship. The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been the search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. It's the first sentence in that book. And Swami Kriyananda, his picture's down at the flowers there. When he read that book in New York City, he was touched, like Jyotish was sharing this morning, by the vibrations, Yogananda's vibration of divine love that emanated from that book. And he took the next bus across the country in 1948 to where? Los Angeles. And met the great Prem Avatar, Paramahansa Yogananda, right on Sunset Boulevard at the Hollywood Church there, and uttered those simple words, "I want to be your disciple." Now in the West, sometimes discipleship has the connotation of discipline. Of course, meditation and spiritual life is a practice. But you know, there's also another word in India for disciple, and that is chela, which means child. You become part of the Guru's spiritual family. And 50 years ago, almost to the day, Jyotish, on an Easter Sunday, knocked on a door in San Francisco. He had just read what book? Autobiography of a Yogi. And he had his brother-in-law had the address of a direct disciple. And so they shyly knocked at this disciple's door. And who was it but Swami Kriyananda? And he said to Jyotish, "I'm working on a project. Would you like to help?" And Jyotish has often joked, I said yes, but I didn't realize it was for the rest of my life, the project. And then just a couple years later, Devi, who had graduated from college and yet didn't actually attend her graduation because she felt so compelled from what book? Autobiography of a Yogi. And she came to Ananda Village on the 4th of July, day of our country's liberation and freedom, marking the path to her inner freedom. But this whole story of Ananda is the story of being a chela and of being a child of the light. And that's what Jyotish and Devi's tour of the West Coast is this year. It's choosing the light. And it's such a simple step for each of us to turn and choose the light. So it is my great honor and joy and privilege to introduce these girls to, let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, that was very kind. I always appreciate when an audience claps before we get up to speak, because we aren't sure if they're going to after we're done speaking. So nice to have it over with.
So I also want to welcome all of you, and especially I want to thank those of you who have put out so much energy throughout the day to make this event so special, and all the booths, the organization, the classes, everything. And really, it's a celebration of light. And I hope this morning we had a little sharing, and we said we hope that you will, those of you who will be here all day, can really see this day as a transformational experience in your life. And I hope those of you who have been with us for all or part of the day have felt a change. And those of you who are just joining us for this evening's program, we extend our heartfelt welcome, and we hope that in what is shared tonight, and it's just really all we have to share are the teachings and the vibration and the ray of our Guru, Yogananda Ji. In one of Master's recorded talks, it was during a group meditation, but he was in poor health then, so he was up in an upper room of the ashram, and he was piping his voice down and talking to the disciples. So before the talk, if you notice, we were sitting just there meditating, and there's a big, beautiful picture of Master at the dedication of Lake Shrine. So I like to think he's right there behind the screen, and he's piping down his love and his vibrations to all of us from his home now in cosmic love. So Jyotish will share, and then I'll share, and we'll begin first with some music.
Okay, let's pray together. In India, if we were doing this program, we would have a lamp here, and we would have different people come up and light the wicks of the lamp, and that symbolically invokes the presence of light, the presence of God, into the room before any event starts. So let's invoke the presence of Yogananda, the presence of God, into the room before we start the evening's program. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Great Masters, especially the Great Master, Paramahansa Yogananda. We ask for your presence, for your grace, for your guidance, but most of all for your love. Help us open our hearts and our minds to thy transformative teachings. Om, peace. Amen.
There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la.
wonderful. Thank you. A lot of these singers have been singing together, not in this group, but singing these songs for many years, and it really comes from the heart, and you can hear that in the music. So this evening we want to talk about the theme of how to achieve your true potential, our true potential. And I guess a little like Google Maps, if you want to achieve something, we need to know where we're going. And so let me start with the concept of who we are and where we're going. And it's a little bit different from the Western concept of creation, the Vedantic concept of creation. The Western concept of creation is that there's a creator who creates the world, but that world is separate from that creator. And so there isn't the potential for the creation to merge back into the creator. But the Vedantic idea or the Vedantic concept of the universe is different, that God doesn't create the universe, He becomes the universe. So that offers a whole new potential to us. It offers the potential for us not to just to go to a heaven or be near God. It offers the potential for us to become part of God, again, because we have come from God. The ancient teachings of India are called Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion or eternal righteousness. And the basic concept of that is that each of us has come from God, and it is our destiny to emerge back into God. And so the full potential that we're looking at is for each of us to become merged back into God, and in fact to know ourselves as that consciousness that is everything. Now this sounds like a nice philosophy, and yet what has happened is that throughout time, throughout many, many centuries and millennia, it doesn't matter the creed of people, it doesn't matter the religion or the race or the gender or the time, none of that matters. People have had the experience of consciousness. In India it's called samadhi, and that mergence back into the consciousness of being everything that is what our true potential is. Now, the lesson to prove to the potential for Yogananda or just for a few people, ultimately every one of us will achieve that because that's who we are in reality. One way of kind of describing this or understanding this is that a creator takes something like a potter, and he takes some mud, and he has a wheel or a process, and through his artistry, he creates a pot out of that mud. And that pot, beautiful though it might be, is separate from the potter, always. But when we dream at night, we create a world, don't we then? We create a whole time and space, we create characters, and in that dream, always there is one character who represents you. Isn't that true? I find it fascinating that we can have this complex thing, but there's always somebody in there that the viewpoint from that character is that's you, and the rest seems to be not you. I find it fascinating. Master said, when we say Master, we're referring to Yogananda. Master said that the reason spiritually, the reason that we dream at night is so that we can understand the process of creation. Because this is the way that God has created. We're essentially the dream characters in God's dream. But our dreams last only a little while, And moreover, when we wake up out of that dream, we look back and we realize that during that time we were dreaming. That wasn't really us, that character in the dream. And even if there were a tragedy that was happening, it might be good, it might be bad, it might be complex, it might be simple. No matter what happens when we wake up, we kind of laugh and say, wasn't that interesting? That's what's going to happen to us, is all of these troubles and trials and the involvement. See, within the dream characters can't get outside of that bubble. And so that dream world seems to be the only thing existing. Imagine if, so within that dream world, that's all that exists. And the reason we know it's a dream is because we wake up. And we can then remember that dream and see that we have two different levels of consciousness. Well, we have two different levels of consciousness. The difference here is one more of timing, one more of length. Master said, imagine if you were born into a room. Let's say that we were born into this room. There were no windows. We couldn't get out of the doors. The whole of our life, we lived for 20 years inside of this room. And that was the whole of our reality. And then somebody came along, somehow came in through the door, and we didn't see, but said, you know, there's a whole world outside of this room. But we've only been here in this room is our whole experience, everything that we remember. So we might believe him, we might not believe him, we might think he's a little bit crazy, we might think that he's wise, but until we ourselves can experience that, we won't really know the reality of it. So our true potential is to experience that, is to break out of the dream bubble that we're in and break out into a much larger, the real world that is beyond the physical plane, and break into that, into timeless, infinite space that contains everything that is, because the dreamer, God, has created the whole of the dream. Now, if that person came in to this room and he was the only person who had ever had that experience, it would be harder to believe him. But that experience has been had by different people for thousands and thousands of years. So it isn't just Yogananda who had the experience of that state of consciousness, samadhi. His master had it. His master before him had it. All throughout the history, long history of India, have been great saints and sages who have had that experience. But it isn't only in India. All religions have people who have had that same experience. In Christianity, they have that experience. In all religions. I won't go through a long list and check them off. Believe me, politically correct, all religions have had that experience, because it is the actual experience of our reality. And so we have to, at some time, have that, regardless of circumstances. So that's what we're looking for. So what does that state of consciousness look like that we're going to achieve? One of the very best descriptions of it in any writings at all is in the autobiography of a yogi. That's partly why that book is as powerful as it is that it's not just the description of samadhi. Yogananda has a poem 2 or 3 pages long of samadhi, talking about what that experience is. Timelessness, that thoughts of all men, past, present, and to come, reside in there. Everything resides in there. Not a sparrow falls without my sight. Everything in creation is contained within the great consciousness of the person who is dreaming that creation. And when we go into the state of samadhi, we become unified with that state of consciousness. And so that's where our full potential is going to lead us. But in the meantime, what's holding us back is that we don't yet have that experience. So the question then becomes, in my mind, how do we get that experience? And when we want to have that experience, that's when we are drawn automatically to a teacher or a teaching or a way of going through a process to find that. In India, they have a statement that says that you don't really need to seek a guru, but you need to prepare yourself wanting one, really wanting a guide. And when you really want a guru, when you're ready, the guru will appear to you. I was with one time in a lecture with Kriyananda, who was giving the talk, and there was a young man who, it was a room half the size of this room, maybe a couple of hundred people were there, and there was a young man who was sitting on the back wall, and on the back wall were a series of pictures of different masters, different religions and different yogis and so on. And this person was wondering who his guru might be. He was attracted to a number of people, but he was most attracted to a saint named Satya Sai Baba, an Indian teacher. And so Kriyananda was quoting that, and he said, when you're ready, your guru will come to you. At that very moment, a picture above that young man fell off and fell into his lap. And you can guess who it was. It was Satya Sai Baba. And so he went and became a disciple of his. The universe is much wigglier than we think that it is. There's a whole lot that's going on behind the scenes because the universe is made out of consciousness, just as a dream is made out of consciousness. And so what goes on behind the scenes, when we're a dream character in the dream, we don't know it. But when we wake up in the morning, we might say, oh, that was really interesting. You know, a lot of times solutions will come to us during the dream. And that means our conscious mind or part of our consciousness is projecting into that dream the kind of message that we need for the solutions. But the dream analogy works for a while, but in our dream, the characters in our dream don't seem to have their own free will. They're created by the dreamer who's dreaming, created by us when we dream. So they don't seem to have individual free will. But when we come into the human form, we have a degree of free will. And Yogananda said that that is God's gift, God's given to us free will. And it's a two-edged sword because we can use that free will to move toward waking up, or we can use that free will to move away from waking up, meaning that we want to stay in the dream or we want to stay in the dreaming process. And the kind of spiritual law is that, and this is a little frightening, is that every desire needs to be fulfilled. And so as long as we keep creating desires, and as long as those desires are needing a dream world in which to fulfill them, then we have to reincarnate over and over to fulfill those desires. So one time, hearing this teaching, Kriyananda asked Master, he said, but does that mean that if I want an ice cream cone, that if I can't get over that, I have to reincarnate in order to have an ice cream cone? It's kind of frightening, isn't it? When you think of all the desires and subliminal things floating through our mind. So Yogananda said, yes, that's what it means. So one of the things that happens in the process of awakening is that gradually something happens that the desire for awakening becomes more potent than any other desire. Some might call it the desire to know God, the desire for God. The desire in India, the term for awakening is, among other things, moksha. It means to cut delusion. And so the cutting of delusion. I think that's what I'm more drawn to. I'm not so drawn personally to merging with an entity, but I don't like the thought of being in delusion. And I want that delusion to end so that I have true knowledge, true understanding. And that's a very potent driving force for me personally. But some way, somehow or another, there will come a driving force that gets stronger and stronger and stronger, so that you want that awakening, you want God, you want merging. And that's the soul, because we come from God. We can't escape that. And so we come from freedom, we come from moksha, we come from that state of consciousness. And then, like the dream, there's a little bubble of kind of a miasma around us. And so we're in that process of awakening, and that grows stronger and stronger and stronger. There's a great Indian saint, Ananda, woman saint of this century, and among other things, she great soul. But one of her disciples, or a man who came to her, wasn't a disciple yet, said to her, yes, but isn't the desire to know God, isn't that just another desire? And she said, yes, it is another desire. But it's the only desire that ends all other desires. And so that desire to move along ends all other desires. And then these great saints, they come into the world because Yogananda, in the autobiography, talks about being in India. He was running a boys' school in Ranchi, India, and he had to, because the little kids were there and always bothering him, he had to go into find places where he could get away from people. So he was in the little storage room, and he was meditating, and he had this vision of these souls, potential saints in America, calling to him. And that's why he came here in 1920, because those souls were calling him to come. Of course, it's all part of a greater plan. But that calling to him and his response, the great masters come out of compassion. Reminds me of a story I heard about Ananda, this saint that I was speaking of. And I was fortunate enough in my life to meet her and spend 3 days with her. Beautiful, beautiful soul. At any rate, she was completely in God consciousness all the time. And she would just do whatever she was kind of called to do. She didn't have any will of her own separate from doing this. There was a young man who was very attracted to her, but she would move around the countryside. Every 3-4 days she would just get up and go somewhere. And he thought, boy, is she ever restless. She can't seem to stay in any place for any length of time. Of course, projecting his own consciousness, but she's so restless. And one time she told him, we're going on a trip. If you'd like to, you can come. And they went, and they were staying by a lake. And so in the morning, they decided that they would go and have a picnic beside this lake. And so they went, and this young man among a small group, and they spread out the blanket, and they took the food out of the picnic hamper, and they were just spreading it out when Ananda Ma got up and said, I need to go. And this young man said, oh my, she can't even sit still long enough to have lunch. And more importantly, to let me have lunch. So he was quite upset. She got it, but they said, no, let's have lunch. She said, no, I have to go now. And she got up and started walking. She came to a tree, and out of the tree, a little bird fell down, a little baby bird. And there was a young boy with her. She said, please pick the bird up and hold it up to me. And so the boy held the bird out, and she looked deeply into its eyes, and it looked at her for 30 seconds or so, and then it fluttered its wings and died. And she said to the group, she said, the reason we came here is because that soul called to me and wanted me to be here as it left the body. And so at that point, this young man realized that it wasn't out of restlessness, it was out of compassion, out of love. So these great masters, what they do for us is always out of compassion, always out of love. So what Yogananda is trying to do for us is to show us what our true potential is, and also how we can achieve that true potential. So what if this is the scope of what is going on, if this is the end point of the journey, this merging back into the consciousness of God, why does it take so long? And what's the problem? Why can't we just sit down and merge into God? Well, that is one of the big questions. In fact, Yogananda asked his guru, Sri Yukteswar, the same question, basically. And Sri Yukteswar, in India, there's different answers. One is that God created this whole outward drama for his Leela, or his play, his dance, and in order to enjoy himself. So the unity wants to enjoy itself through apparent diversity. And you might say that that's one reason we dream at night. We enjoy dreaming. We like those dramas. We like the diversity. And it's all coming out of our own mind. But Swami Kriyananda had another beautiful answer for why does God create the universe. And he said that God is made of joy. Consciousness of God, described in India as Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So God is made out of bliss, and it is the very nature of bliss to want to share itself. And so that bliss needs to create the appearance of diversity so that joy can share itself with other joy. That's a beautiful understanding of that question. But coming back to the question, why can't we sit down and say, I want to merge into God, and therefore do it? One of Yogananda's disciples asked him exactly that. The Master was saying that if you wanted enough to merge into God, you could do so right at this very instant. And the young man said, well, I couldn't do that just by saying I wanted to do it, could I? And Yogananda said, well, you've answered your own question. See, it's our doubts. It's the mental concept and habitual thinking of the kind of attractive state that we find ourselves in. That's the ego, the aspect of us that is going to merge is the soul. And it's that soul that reincarnates over and over and takes on different bodies from one incarnation to the next. It's that that's going to merge back. The ego, we have to shed the confines of the ego. Yogananda said ego is the soul that has become identified with this body and this personality. So our soul has to shed that identity. And so part of the shedding of that identity is simply to get rid of the habitual habit pattern, because I am this body, I am this personality, I am this little world that I live in. That is the only world. And so Yogananda talked again and again and again in many of his teachings and many of his books about the power of the mind, the power of consciousness to achieve whatever we're wanting to achieve. What is holding us back, what's holding you back, and what is holding me back is that our mind is not yet ready to accept the fact that we are a cosmic being. We have habitual patterns of thinking, we have fears, we have desires, we have many little things that still hold us in a state of separation. But the soul's overwhelming desire to merge back, to get out of moksha, will eventually break down all of those barriers. But for us, at this stage in the game, we need to understand, and Yogananda was trying to get us to understand, the power of the mind, how absolutely powerful our expectations and our mental thoughts are in our life. So that if you have a thought that you can do something, you will be able to do it. If there are no other thoughts in your mind, if you have the thought that you can't, you will not be able to do that. Yogananda told a very interesting story. He had a disciple, and this disciple came to him kind of desperate. And he said, I have a kind of a curse about me. If I get a job, I either immediately get fired, or even worse, the company that I get hired for goes bankrupt and is out of business. And Yogananda said, well, let me help you. I'm going to get you a job. And so I got him a job with a little company. And about 3 weeks later, this man came back. And he said, it happened again. I got fired. The company went bankrupt. And Yogananda said, let me get you another job. And so he got him a job with a medium-sized company. And after a month, that company went into bankruptcy. And Yogananda said, let me get you a job with a big company, which he did. And after 3 months, that company went belly up. And so this man was just, he was aghast at this curse that he had. And then he came to Yogananda, and Yogananda said, well, since these companies keep going into bankruptcy, here's what I want you to do. Take all your savings and start a company. And the man said, no, I can't do that. It's going to go bankrupt. I know that it's happened over and over and over again. And then Yogananda said, this is happening because that is your expectation. That is what your mind is producing. And the man said, well, maybe that's why I get fired, but the company, I can't make them go bankrupt. And Yogananda said, no, you aren't making them go bankrupt. But because of this pattern in your mind, you are attracted to a company that's about to go bankrupt. And so the power of your mind creates a magnetic field. Your expectations create a magnetic field around you that will, you can't control the universe, but you can warp it a little bit. Or warp your own individual part in that to fulfill what your expectations are. Now, that may seem like it's a little bit far-fetched, but it's an absolute law of the universe that that's going to continue to happen to you. So if we're going to achieve our full potential, then we have to learn to work with our consciousness to change that failure consciousness to success consciousness. Change limited consciousness to expanded consciousness. One of the ways that we do that is through meditation. Because in our normal waking, active behavior, we have a certain kind of a view of who we are and what the world is. It's not like we consciously create this. It's not that. It's just assumptions. And everything works this way, and this is how it is, and this is how I am. In meditation, well, let me start with sleep. Master said that in sleep, our consciousness withdraws. And in deep sleep, we don't know whether we're a man or a woman. We don't know whether we're successful or not successful. We don't have age. We don't have anything. That consciousness withdraws. He says that's why we have to sleep, is because we can't exist without that withdrawal from delusion. And so deep sleep withdraws us from delusion, and he called that state counterfeit samadhi. Because in order to achieve samadhi, we have to withdraw from the delusion. But sleep is counterfeit because we aren't there awake and aware in order to enjoy it. And so real samadhi takes that withdrawal, requires that withdrawal of energy. And we have to sit, and that's the techniques of meditation that Yogananda came and brought to the West. So in meditation, we sit, we quiet our minds, we quiet the restlessness of the heart. We do certain techniques, generally involving the breath, but it involves really not the breath, it involves the life force. And so we do techniques that help that life force to withdraw. And when that life force withdraws into the deep spine and then comes to the point between the eyebrows, when all of our life force does that, all of our life force withdraws, and all of it comes up to the point between the eyebrows and is unified there, we go into the state of samadhi. And so what we're trying to do is achieve that withdrawal, but in a conscious level. But when we meditate, and when we meditate deeply, Yogananda defined meditation as deep concentration on God or on one of the aspects of God, such as light or sound or joy, love, peace, harmony, peace, calmness, power, so on. So there are 8 aspects of God. So when we meditate, first we do the meditation techniques that are meant to withdraw that life force. And that withdrawal of life force allows us then to concentrate. And when we concentrate on one of these universal aspects, let's say we're concentrating on light, when we become light in our mind, in our concentration, we lose all of those limiting self-identifications. See, light doesn't have any limiting self-identification. It's just energy, it's universal. And so by daily practice, one might say reaffirming who our true identity is, our true self is, by that practice on a daily basis, we begin to break down the delusion of that we are this body and this personality. We're light, or we're cosmic sound, or we're infinite joy, or we're infinite love. And when we rest in that state for some period of time, then that limiting self-identity begins to break down. And then it's not so hard to make the leap to have the identity that will come to us in samadhi. So that's partly the way we achieve this, is through the practice of meditation. I say partly, it's the most important of all the ways. But there are also ways that Yogananda taught for us to work with our conscious minds. So we work with the conscious thoughts in order to change the way that we perceive our own self-identity, one might say. And so he wrote 2 or 3 different books, all dealing with, one is Whispers from Eternity, that deals with prayer demands of God. He said we should never pray as if we're beggars. That, oh, I'm such a little insignificant thing, and I know, God, you really don't care about me, and you really aren't going to answer this prayer, but I felt I should kind of do it anyway. That doesn't have any power. He says pray believing, pray knowing that God wants to grant your prayers. And he gave a number of what he calls prayer demands for different situations and different kinds of bhavs. So those prayer demands are one way in which we can change the mental state. But on top of that, he also gave affirmations. And he said you do affirmations over and over and over again until, by using the power of the mind to produce an alternate thought to the limiting negativity, then the power of the mind, see, the power of the mind can become infinite. We have a subconscious, we have a conscious, and we have a superconscious. The state of samadhi is in the superconscious realm. But even moving toward that superconscious mind is incredibly powerful. And that superconscious mind can then create these changes. So Yogananda said to have affirmations going in our consciousness all of the time, or much of the time. He said every morning and every evening we should pray, my Father and, not pray, affirm, my Father and I are one. Father, and just that simple, my Father and I are one. Do that every morning, every evening, when you're going into any kind of a challenge or a test. My Father and I are one. And God has infinite power to work through us. The body, too, expresses affirmation or kind of the opposite, resignation, I guess. You never hear somebody going, oh, I feel so wonderful. I'm just filled with energy. I'm joyful, happy, healthy. I'll be wealthy. The body knows that it has its own wisdom. That's why saints are depicted with their eyes in upraised position, because when the energy rises in the spine, when the energy goes up, and the spine is also the central nervous system, so when the energy goes up, the eyes go up automatically. That's one reason why we meditate with our consciousness here, because the energy of the eyes being raised there brings the energy to, in the body, the prefrontal lobes of the brain. And meditators, it doesn't take very long, 2 weeks of meditating 10 minutes a day will begin to make changes physically in your brain. Your prefrontal lobes will grow more active, and the more primitive parts of the brain having to do with negative emotions like fear and anger and hatred and all those negative things that are more fight and flight syndrome and all of that, those areas of the brain begin to lose the activity in them. They become less reactive. And so a little bit of meditation will help very much change the patterns. This morning we were giving a talk and someone asked, how can I change these habit patterns and these ways of behaving? And one way is through meditation. In the 1920s, when Yogananda was going around the country giving his spiritual campaign talks, he said that if you look into light at the spiritual eye, at the forehead, during meditation, it will change your brain cells. Now, that was medical heresy at the time. They said, no, that is impossible. The understanding at that time was the brain grew until we were about 20 or 22 years old, and then it froze at that point and went into a long, gradual decline until we reached old age and we could never remember anything anymore. And that there was no way to reverse that, and we were all doomed. And Yogananda said, no. Meditate and your brain cells will change. Now we have the scientific ability to actually follow that with MRIs and different kinds of measuring devices. And in fact, for meditators, we see that not only does the prefrontal lobe get energy, but it grows neurons. The brain cells change. And we also see that other aspects of the brain decrease in their energy and in their activity. And so these things do change us, but the power of affirmation, the power of the mind to change the mind is literally infinite. And Yogananda then went on with that failure fellow. He told him to keep repeating over and over and over again success thoughts. And Yogananda wrote many, many affirmations. And they're all positive. Don't do an affirmation that sounds something like, I know I've been a failure all along, but finally I'm going to overcome that. That's not the kind. You always want to take the positive pole of what you're trying to work on. And so if you're concerned about failure, you might pray, my Father and I are one. He has the infinite power to accomplish anything. We have the infinite power to accomplish anything together. Not, my Father is separate from me and I'm a failure and I hope he helps me. So the affirmation, the energy of the mind, if you use that in the direction that you want to go in, it can become stronger and stronger and stronger until you can produce in your own consciousness the kind of strength and power that nothing can stop you, nothing can deter you. Yogananda would come running out to this on the stage in the early days when he was lecturing here, and he would shout out to the audience, "How feels everyone?"
Awake and ready!
Yeah, they would shout back, "Awake and ready!" And then he'd say, "How feels everyone?"
Awake and ready!
Then say, "Okay, now you've got some energy going. Now I can talk to you." See, so we've got to get that energy going, and we've got to get it directed in the right direction. And when we do so, that power becomes extremely, extremely powerful in the ability to change our consciousness. So meditation plus affirmation will move us in the direction of our ultimate potential. But ultimately, we are already made of the substance of God consciousness. And it is that we're trying to tap back into. And so, ultimately, through meditation, it means that we have to quiet the feelings of the heart and all of those desires for ice cream cone and the other billions of things that we want. We have to drop those. We have to release them. We have to get to the point where truly, deeply, sincerely, we are saying, I want only Thee, Lord. One of the reasons that we do chants the way that we do is because those chants are spiritual affirmations. We have a chant that says, I want only Thee, Lord. Another one, God alone, I want nothing except You. And those chants and those affirmations done over and over in your life will produce changes. And Yogananda said that, he said, give me 5 of the worst kind of give me the worst kind of boys, and if they follow the teachings that I give them, if they do his high technique of Kriya Yoga, if they do Kriya Yoga the way that I teach them, in 5 years they will become saints. And so we're already way ahead of that curve. So with the power of these teachings, it's really only your mind and your habitual pattern of thinking of yourself as limited that is holding you back. So meditation, affirmation, and then finally being in the right company. Be in the company of those who express the kind of thinking, the kind of life, the kind of attitudes that you want to achieve in your own life because of the exchange of magnetism that takes place. And especially when you're trying to make changes, avoid those people that don't allow change or that pull you back into old habit patterns. But these teachings, Devi and I have been teaching now for 50 years, and I can say from my own experience that not only have they worked for me in my life, but I have seen thousands of people take up these teachings and have great success with them. And Yogananda, I'll leave with this thought. He said, once an inspiration to change in a positive direction, once that inspiration comes to you, you have drawn that inspiration to you by the power of your own desire for improvement. He said, then act on it. So if you have the desire after this weekend to learn to meditate or to improve your meditations, act on it, because your soul has drawn that desire to you, and don't let it just dissipate. But these are wonderful teachings, and they're all done in order to help us live happier, more fulfilled lives, and finally to achieve our own highest potential.
Yogananda had nothing if not confidence, and that confidence was born of an awareness of God's power within him. And I don't want to embarrass anyone, because I know people have to use the washroom, but if people would get up in the middle of his talk and leave, he would say, "Sit down, you will never hear a talk like this again." So please go to the washroom. From my perspective, when I think about what is if we want to awaken our true potential, what is our true potential? And it's different for every single one of us. But there are things that we have in common. And I think we can look at it this way. We can say our true potential is inner freedom. And that inner freedom expresses itself in different ways. It's the inner freedom to choose to be happy under all circumstances. No matter what's going on, we have the freedom to choose to be happy. Once, one of our teachers, one of our Ananda members who's now teaching in our centers in India, was giving a discourse. And in India, you're often asked a question because they have the tradition of yogis who have great powers and can levitate and manifest things. So we're often asked the question, what powers do you have? And, you have to be honest. And yet not diminish the validity of our teachings. And so once someone asked Jaya, what powers do you have? And Jaya was a very humble man, Nayaswamis Jaya. He said, well, I can't say that I have any powers. And then he paused and he said, no, I have one power. I have the power to choose to be happy or not. He said, I don't always use that power, but I have the power. And this is one of our potentials, to do that. Not to be just a little ping pong ball tossed back and forth on the table of life, but to say, no, I stand. Yogananda said, the yogi should be able to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. That's a very good image to use right now in our world. To stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. To find the way to be happy under all circumstances. And again, I speak from my own experience. People say, oh, you've had such a sheltered life, you've lived in an ashram all your life, and you really don't know the difficulties. Well, I don't want to disabuse you of that thought, but if you are seeking to get out of delusion, if you are seeking spiritual freedom, if you are seeking the ability to awaken your own potential, it is not an easy road you will walk. It doesn't work that way. Master said, again, Master is our Guru, Yogananda. Master said, it is arm-to-arm combat with the forces of delusion. And so it takes tremendous inner strength to choose to be happy, to choose to, under all circumstances, say, I can do this. And some of you know the story, but I love to share it because it's a story everyone can relate to, or at least empathize with. In 1976, which was 8 years after we founded the Ananda community, our community was hit by a forest fire. We live in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and a lot of trees and pine trees and underbrush. And this forest fire just swept through the community, and everything was destroyed in an afternoon. Everything. Every home, there was one little shed that got saved, but everything was gone. Jyotish and I had a home we lived in. We had an 11-day-old child. All we had were the clothes on our back. But in that period where you could have been defeated by life, Jyotish was up trying to defend the house, and I was in a different part of the community. And then we finally, towards the end of the day, found each other. And I didn't want him to be worried about me. Here I've got this wife with this new baby. I didn't want him to feel, oh my God, how am I going to provide for them? And so we both met each other, and we had these big smiles on our face. A little bit of an affirmation, but nevertheless, we got them there. And Jyotish, the house we lived in was a geodesic dome that Jyotish had built. And it leaked pretty badly. And owner-builder. And Jyotish looked at me and he didn't say, oh, how are you? This is terrible. He said, you know what? we don't have to worry about leaks anymore. We chose to be happy in that moment, and it got us through. It got us through just fine. And then we were staying in the home of, actually, Swami Kriyananda. His was on another piece of the property, and he said, you all can stay in my home. And so we were there, and 2 days later, there was a knock on the door. It was the Red Cross. And they said, well, we're here to help the disaster victims. And we said, oh, well, that would be us. They said, no. We were fine. And they said, no, the people who lost everything. And we said, no, we lost everything. And they just couldn't believe it. But we chose in that moment to say, we can do this. This is what happened. We can be defeated by life, or we can choose to be happy. So that's inner freedom, to do that. Let no one ever tell you that you should be upset about something. Why aren't you? There was that movie, which I very much watched, The Bridge of Spies. Which I don't know if you all saw it, but there was this Russian spy who had been captured in America, and everyone kept saying to him, aren't you worried? Aren't you worried? And he'd say, would it need help? Would it help? So, I'm going to give you. So the power to choose to be happy, which is part of freedom. Another aspect, we have the inner freedom to not buy into our self-doubts and our negative self-images, but to say, I can do, one of Master's great affirmations was, I can do anything when so I think. So if we all harbor, it's like we come trailing these chains of failure and memory. We had a friend who's going through a health crisis now, and they began working with a psychic, and the psychic told them, amazing, do you remember, and she didn't know anything, she said, I'm tuning into you, when you were 10 years old, you weren't picked on that baseball team. It was your father's team, and he was the coach, and there was an alternate chosen. You got to be, though your team won, you always felt rejected, and that's why you're saying that. I mean, she didn't know any of that, but it's exactly what happened. And he said, I feel this energy is being released. So we all come trailing this burden of past experiences and self-doubt and limited self-image. And we have the freedom to say, I am not those things. And no one can tell me I can't do these things. There was a young man who lived at Ananda in the early years. He was in his early 20s. And when he was a teenager, he had cancer. And one of his legs was amputated. And he just had a prosthetic leg. It was from the hip. So it was not an easy life. And we were having a work day, where we have regular work days at the community, all community work days. And the day that the work day was scheduled, it was pouring rain. And this young man, his job was scheduled to work on the roof. We were shingling one of the roofs at the retreat facility. And we said, oh, John, don't do it, which was not the right thing to do. He said, no. I said I would do this, and I would do that, and I will do it. He worked on the roof all day in the rain with an artificial leg. At the end of the day, he came down. He was radiant. He was so radiant, and he said, "There's no way I could have done that, but through the grace of God." And if that's the point, if Master said, "Bite off more than you can chew, and then chew it," and so and he said, every day, try to do something, however small it may be, that you've never done before. And if you can take that up as a challenge, then you say, there's no way I can do this. The first public talk I gave was Swami Kriyananda, for Ananda. Swami Kriyananda was giving a big talk in San Francisco at the Palace of Fine Arts. There were, 700 people there. And he gave a series of talks Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday night he said to Jyotish, I want you to give part of the talk Sunday, just the night before. And I'd never done that before. And I said, okay, all right, we'll do that. But my affirmation, I was very sorry and humbly admit, was, I can't do this. I can't do this. There's no way. And he said, I'll talk, and then you two sit in the front row, and then at a certain point, I'm going to invite you up to the stage, and you talk for not 8 minutes. And so I was sitting in the front row doing my affirmation. I can't do this. I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. And then I could sort of feel him winding down. I knew he was coming to the end of his talk, and I was afraid, go on, just keep talking. But then, just a few moments before I knew I had to get out of my chair, walk up on the stage, stand in this big auditorium in front of 700 people, I felt this hand, invisible, loving, supportive hand, reach out and almost took my mind, my consciousness, and just walked me up on the stage. And I stood there, and I wasn't nervous at all. And I don't know what I said, but no one got up and left. So, but if I had said, I will do this, I never would have known the grace that comes when you say, God, I can't do this by myself, but with your support, I can do this. And that's our potential. Master talks so much about our own but God-given power. And when we take on challenges, that's what we realize. I can't do this, but God can do it through me. I just saw an article about a young woman whose father a car rolled over her dad, and the dad was pinned under the car. She just ran over, lifted up this 2,000-pound car and pulled her dad out. And everyone was saying, how did you do that? How did you do that? She said, I felt this superhuman strength flow through me, and I was able to do it. She didn't have any sore muscles or anything. And how does that happen? What's the switch that turns on that power? It's can't do this. It's can't do this. Doubt. It's saying I can do this with God's help, not by my own power, but with that power that can flow through me. If I'm willing to say I'm more than I think I am, I can do more than I think I am. I can become more. And so the freedom to say, I will take on these challenges, and I will see how far I can go in this journey of self-discovery. To realize, Yogananda used to always say, I want you to discover who and what you really are. And it's such a wonderful journey, because every day, every period of time that goes by, those doors open more and more, and we say, I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not threatened anymore. I'm confident. So we were driving on the freeway down to the event with our dear friend Bharvi. There was a billboard that said, and it was black and white, and it showed this woman in silhouette looking down, and it was saying, tired of being a victim, abuse and unfair firing and all that. And the world tells us this, we're a victim, we're not good enough. But Yogananda said, no, you are so much more than you know. And stand in that power. And sometimes it doesn't happen right away. It takes time. It takes affirming over and over, I can do this. And there are so many wonderful examples. We had a friend who was, her car stalled. This was in the day before electric cars. And some people came by trying to be very helpful. And they said, let's pour some gas in the carburetor. And they did. This is safe for those of you who know her who lives at Ananda Village. The carburetor blew up in her face. Her face was burned beyond recognition. And yet she was a deep, powerful soul. And they took her to the hospital, and we went to visit her as soon as we could. And I knew we wouldn't be able to recognize her. She was in a ward with others. So I looked by the beds to see her shoes, and I saw her shoes, and then I knew that was her. And so we didn't have any moment where we were saying, oh my God, what happened? And the doctors came in and said, you know, your face may be very badly scarred, and I'm sure you're in a lot of pain. And she said, you know, I'm not in any pain. And they couldn't believe it. And she just kept affirming, this is going to heal. This is going to be fine. I won't have any loss here. You would never know. I mean, this was 40 years ago. Her face is totally without scars. You would never know unless you knew that story. That's saying, I can do this. Whatever life gives me, I can push back. Not with ego, not with arrogance, not with pride, but with the understanding that God is working through you and can do anything through you. So there's also the inner freedom to follow, when a choice is presented to you, should I do this, should I do that, to follow the highest road you can see, to choose the highest road you can see, and then follow it. The freedom, not to say, well, I've always done it this way, maybe what will people think if I do it another way, to have the courage to make the right choices in your life, free of past habits, of other people's expectations. I remember once, years ago, I hate to say this because it dates us so much, but there was a life before internet. There really was. It wasn't all that long ago. But once Swami was reading a book, or he sought out an advertisement for a book, and he wanted it, but he went to a bookstore and they said, oh, we don't have it. And so he said, well, he saw the publisher. So he said, can I borrow your phone? And he just dialed the publisher in New York. He said, I'd like to order that book. And I just looked at him and I said, Swami, you're so direct. And he said, I don't know any other way to be. But if I see the right course of action, I just do it. And I don't let anything get in my way. And that's the story. Ananda Sangha, Ananda Worldwide, began in Swami Kriyananda's apartment in San Francisco with 4 or 5 students, one of which was Jyotish. And now it's a worldwide work with hundreds of thousands of members practicing and following these teachings. Because Swami Kriyananda said, by my own but God-given power, come hell or high water, we are going to do this. And hell and high water came, believe me. But we kept going. There's a scene I always love from the movie Gandhi, where it's the episode where he's doing the March to the Sea. The British imposed the tax on salt. And so Gandhi, what a creative genius he was, among other things. He said, how can the British charge us for salt? The salt is part of this world. We're going to march to the sea, and we will draw the salt from the ocean. How can they charge us? And so in a brilliantly directed movie, but it starts off showing Gandhi walking with 1 or 2 other people marching along with him, and then the camera pans back, and there's a few dozen, and then a few hundred, and then thousands, and then it shows them coming to the ocean, and hundreds of thousands of people. This is the power that is generated when people say, nothing can stop us. The power of goodness, the power of truth. And we need that power in the world right now, today. It's being jeopardized by alternate facts. There are no alternate facts. There's truth. There's truth. And we have to live that truth. And we have to have our soul force dedicated to that truth. And so the power to choose the highest course of action and to follow it. And then the power, the inner freedom to summon up the energy that it will take to succeed in our goals. You know, there are many, many dreamers who have beautiful ideas and beautiful visions, But I like the process of saying, this is my goal. How much will it take to accomplish that goal? Not just how much money, but how much time, how much life commitment, how much training, how much overcoming adversity to look at the challenge before you and to figure out how you are going to find the energy to accomplish what you want to accomplish, what you know is right. And that's the beautiful thing, because once you begin living in that way, the universe supports that. Swami used to tell us a story, which I just loved, about a fellow disciple of Yogananda, brother disciple. And this man was he was a Swiss man, and he was a successful mountain climber. And he had made many first ascents up very difficult mountains. And one day he was climbing alone in the Alps. And he was trying a route that no one had ever taken before, up a very difficult mountain. And so he started making this ascent. And he got to a certain point, and then he realized why no one had ever taken that route before, because it was impassable and impossible, seemingly, because he came to a ledge. He came up sheer, and then there was a ledge going into the mountain. But the ledge then curved up and over, so that it overhang onto space. But this man, he said, well, what's my choice? To lay here and die, or to keep trying? And so he figured out how much energy he was going to need. And he'd go up, walk over on that, and till he literally got upside down, and then he would fall down, and he'd crash on that ledge. And he did it over and over and over again till his body was bruised. But he said, I would rather die trying than just give up, to be passive. And so he kept doing it, and then at a certain point, the universe supported his efforts. He hadn't met Yogananda yet at this point, but he felt this power holding him up to that ledge, holding him over as it overhung into space, and he was able to climb up and make that ascent. The power of the universe responds to our own determination and willpower, and it adds that strength to our own. So all these ways, if we can see, I want the freedom to choose the right course of action, to choose to be happy, to choose to be everything I can be, to have the most positive self-image I can have of myself. The universe will support that, but we need to start the journey. And in starting the journey, sometimes it's scary, because we think, well, what if it doesn't work for me? It worked for those guys, but what if it doesn't work for me? God is not partial. The universe is run by divine mathematics. What you put out, you get back, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And so if you put out that willpower, that energy, you will be surprised. That's the moment where you hold your breath and step off the cliff. And it's only in that moment, before your feet feels a support coming up, that's the most magic moment of all. And it's in that moment where your courage and your faith and your trust in the universe is tested and validated. But it never will be validated if you don't take the risk. You have to take the risk and go out on the ledge, go out on the overhanging cliff and say, I believe. And in my life, in Jyotish's life, we have seen that validation hundreds and hundreds of times. And if there's anything you can take away from what we're sharing, it's simply have the courage to be everything you can be. Don't be afraid of it. Don't let anyone convince you that you are less than that. But have the courage to say, I don't know how far I can go, but I will take the first step. And that first step leads to the next step until you find there's a beautiful chant written by one of Yogananda's foremost woman disciple, Sister Gyanamata. And the words go, "Before my eyes, my dead self lies, O bliss beyond compare." Meaning, before my eyes, my little self, my self-limiting thoughts, my doubts and my fears, I see them all lying before me. And the bliss I know from recognizing who and what I really am is worth everything. And that's the challenge truly of life, is to wake up to our true potential as children of the divine. What God has is ours. It's our birthright, Yogananda said. So find in your heart the motivation to take that step. And if you do, the doors will open onto vistas you cannot even imagine right now. And I would like to close by leading us in something from Yogananda's wonderful book, surprisingly called How to Awaken Your True Potential. And the book begins with these words of Yogananda, and he calls it a sacred invitation. And so I would like to close with this invitation. So please close your eyes and sit up straight. Focus your gaze at the point between the eyebrows. Draw your energy there. And feel the freedom to be everything you want to be. And Yogananda says, he offers us this sacred invitation. Come out of your closed chamber of limitation. Breathe in the fresh air of vital thoughts. Exhale poisonous thoughts of discouragement, discontentment, or hopelessness. Never suggest to your mind human limitations of sickness, old age, or death, but constantly remind yourself, I am the infinite who has become the body. Take long mental walks on the path of self-confidence. Exercise with instruments of judgment, introspection, and initiative. Feast unstintingly on creative thinking within yourself and others. Above all, cultivate the habit of meditation. This is the inner switch you turn on to connect yourself with the infinite. Hold on to the after effects of meditation by your attention. You will then find that you are a reservoir of power in body, mind, and soul. By constantly holding in mind the peaceful after effects of meditation, by feeling immortality in the body, and by feeling the ocean of God's bliss beneath the changeable waves of experience, the soul can find perpetual rejuvenation. You are all God's if you only knew it. You must look within. Behind the wave of your consciousness is the sea of God's presence. Claim your divine right. Awake, you shall behold the glory of God.
Thy light within us shine.
such a blissful evening. Thank you, Jyotish and Devi, for sharing the light with us.